Hey everybody, welcome back to the Behavior Revolution Scriptures. And I find it really exciting that we're talking about the reign, because these are the kingdom books. Ever since we started Samuel and we started talking about the fact that it's going to be Israel's first king, which we saw just recently raised up in Saul, and how he was so excited and Samuel was excited, everything was happening. And now it's starting to go pear-shaped because Saul is wanting his own way. And what I find also really exciting is at the same time we've come into the kingdom books, which are all about Yahushua's reign. These are all shadows, remember, of what Yahushua's looking for in his people, how we are to behave. Right around that same time that the kingdom books, we started Samuel, these articles about the reign started coming up. We're going to be talking about the dynasty today. The reign dynasty. Christopher's been writing some amazing articles lately, and of course, as we're going to see as we go along, this particular article started with Rebecca's twins. Remember, there were two nations inside your womb. One will be in submission to the other, and it went through from article to article until we've come to today's article, and it's just, the confirmation is just uncanny. Yahushua is really talking to the behavior revolution. And no doubt he's talking to you too, because he's coming closer. Time's obviously getting short and he wants his bride prepared. So while there was time maybe to be stuffing around before, there's not anymore. We can't get away with anything. You've been seeing these videos we've been doing in Christopher and Victoria's lounge room, at their dining table, just the open chats. Thank you for the comments. We're glad that you're really being touched and affected by the honesty. We're trying to be open and honest, and just because that's what's needed in the body right now. You can all see what we're going through, and it's the same thing, from what I gather, you're going through as well. So the other thing that's exciting about here in Samuel is this show I've been watching recently called Of Kings and Prophets. It actually starts coming into the story in this episode here. It's actually where we're up to. So I'll be using a lot of footage if YouTube will let me. If you can find that TV series online or wherever you want to find it, it's really interesting. It's the best thing I've seen as far as scriptural context. For ages, it's really realistic. So let's get into the reign dynasty today. Look at your screens. Reign dynasty. So the relationship between Sam and Saul is starting to get very testy. Saul's doing what he wants to do, making random sacrifices that he's not supposed to do. He's not waiting. He's not doing what he's told. Samuel's getting stressed out and frustrated with him. And so we're coming into a new chapter today called the Reign Dynasty. And it's all going to wrap up nicely. We did deal with this article. Victoria and I spoke a lot about it in our last dining room table episode. But it's related to this episode too, so we're going to go into it again because it's so phenomenal. Let's go. The Reign Dynasty. We've now seen the rise of Israel's first monarchy in King Saul. But because of his many failures in doing things his own way, Sam has informed him that his dynasty will shortly come to an end. So today we'll see what happens to someone who is determined to rule Yahushua's kingdom, but not according to his instructions. The replacement of Saul and his dynasty by a man with a totally different nature, one much closer to Jonathan's than to his father's. So after we tie up some loose ends here today, our next video introduces us to the Nagid, or prince, the king in waiting, who is none other than David. Of course, the only person who knows that David is the anointed prince at this point is Yahushua. So it's getting really exciting, guys, seeing prophetic history. We're going to talk about this in our next episode. Just all the journey that we've seen from Abraham. It really started with Abraham, didn't it? Crossing over and going into Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, going into Egypt and then coming out again, the 12 tribes, and all the prophecies that are coming true. And they're all going to culminate in this man David, and what goes on from there. So let's go. What chapter are we in? Chapter 15 of Samuel. One day Sam told King Saul, "Yahuwah had me anoint you to be the king of his people Yisrael. Now listen to this message from him. When the Israelites were on their way out of Egypt, the nation of Amalek, from Jacob's twin brother Esau, were ruthless and attacked them. So now I'm going to make Amalek pay. Go and attack them, completely destroy them and all their possessions, putting them all under the ban. Listen, this is a set-apart war, so don't have any mercy. Kill their men, women, children, even their babies. Slaughter their cattle, their sheep, their camels, and their donkeys. Now, if you don't know much about Amalek, the Amalekites, this is what I find fascinating, because if you've forgotten about this, a few episodes ago, Christopher wrote an article about the twins, Rebecca's twins. There were two nations in your womb. Don't worry, that's why you're in so much pain. There's two nations in your womb. One will be subjected to the other. Well, what do we see here? Don't let this slide by. The nation of Amalek is from Jacob's twin brother Esau. Not the only nation, because the Edomites and there are other groups of people as well from Esau. But I'm just looking at what Yahushua's saying through Christopher's article. I'm just looking at that and looking at these scriptures that we're going through, because I'm always looking for the confirmation, looking for the thread, what Yahushua's saying. He's really with us, speaking to us, you know. And he might be saying similar things to you, whether you're sharing them with us or not is another thing, but he's confirming things left, right and centre. And look here, a few episodes ago we did that article, and now we see that Yahushua's telling Saul to go and attack the Amalekites because of how cruel they were. And just a little side point, they're from Jacob's twin brother Esau, one of the twins that was in Rebecca's womb. Interesting. It must be Yahushua. So, and the Amalekites here were down in this area here. Getting used to this map. Philistia, Amalek. Just in case you can't remember why Yahushua hates the Amalekites so much, remember, Amalek were known enemies of Yahushua. In Exodus 17, I will erase the memory of Amalek from the earth, for they raised their fist against my throne, Yahushua had told Moses in Exodus 17. Also, back in Deuteronomy, as Israel came to the end of their 40 years wanderings and approached Canaan, Joshua had said, people of Israel, do you remember what the Amalekites did to you after you came out of Egypt? You were tired, and they followed along behind, attacking and killing off those older and weaker who couldn't keep up with the others. I mean, that's real cowardly. That's a real dick move, isn't it? Just attacking the weak and the children and the older and weaker ones. That's really cruel. This is their character. That's why Yahushua made them his enemies. So Joshua said, remember these guys? Attacking. This showed that the Amalekites are hideous beasts with no respect for Yahuwah. So he's going to help you capture the land from them and give you peace. But when that day comes, you must wipe out the Amalekites so completely that no one will remember they ever existed. So you'll notice in this footage that I've been playing behind me, it just seems like a caravan of Amalekites that King Saul is reluctant to slaughter because they seem so helpless. And Samuel's told him, you got to go and slaughter them. In the story here, you'll find that it's an actual whole town. It's not a caravan, but anyway. Yahushua says, and this stands forever, even today and when he returns, Yahushua says that those who oppose him and are against his chosen people don't fear or respect him and are his enemies and will be completely annihilated with no mercy. That's what's going to happen when he returns. All be frackled up.
Elohim displeased with your victory against the Philistines. But there is another enemy who has done us grievous harm. As Moses brought our people out of Egypt, the Amalekites killed our women and children.
That was 10 generations ago.
Elohim has commanded that in retribution you destroy their men, destroy their women, and destroy their children.
The Amalekites are no threat to us. They are nothing. Our enemies now are the Philistines.
Do you defy Elohim's command?
I ask for his blessings for the union of my people.
Slay the Amalekites, and you will have it. Elohim has spoken.
So, Saul's just been told to go and annihilate the Amalekites. So Saul sent messengers to every town and village, telling them to send men to join the army at Telaim. And there were 200,000 troops in all, and 10,000 of these were from Judah. Whoop-de-doo. Saul organized them, then led them to a valley near one of the towns in Amalek, where they got ready to make a surprise attack. Some Kenites lived nearby, completely different group of people. Kenites lived by, and Saul told them, "Your people have been so kind and charitable to our nation when we left Egypt, always standing by us with great care and friendship. So I don't want any of you to get harmed when I wipe out the Amalekites. So you better leave here now and stay away for a while," okay? So the Kenites left, and Saul attacked the Amalekites from Havilah to Shur, which is just east of Egypt. And every Amalekite was killed by the sword, except King Agag. Saul and his army let Agag live, and they also spared the best sheep and cattle, because they didn't want to destroy anything of value. So they only put under the ban those animals that were worthless or weak. What was Yahusha's instruction again? I know I took the focus off the point because I was talking about Christopher's article and about Rebecca and the two twins, but what did Yahusha actually say? Put everything under the ban. We've dealt with the ban. We know what the ban means now. It's a set-apart war. Anything put under the ban belongs to Yahusha. You don't touch it. You don't take it. You don't hide it under your tent like Achan. You don't have anything to do with it because it's supernaturally charged. It's Yahusha's, so it's set apart property. And you saw what happened in the past when that was not followed. So they were told to put everything under the ban. And what's Saul done? He kept a whole lot of sheep and cattle and kept the king alive. So then Yahusha told Sam, "Saul has turned away from following me again and no longer performs my words. And I'm sorry I ever made him king." I found that interesting. This is in the BYNV as well, this word performs. I'd never heard it written in the scripture like that before. You know, he no longer performs my words. Did you know we're supposed to be performing, acting out, behaving Yahusha's words? So Saul's no longer doing that. He's no longer performing Yahusha's words, and he's sorry I ever made him king. Sam had been the one to publicly anoint Saul and sing his praises, giving up his own role as Yisrael's leader to be obedient to Yahusha. All Yisrael knew that Sam heard Yahusha's voice, so had he heard wrong, misunderstood or disobeyed? Had he, Sam, chosen the wrong guy? Sam got no sleep that night. He was incredibly angry and disgusted with Saul and bewildered beyond words. So, absolutely heartbroken and furious, he cried out to Yahusha all night long, venting his burning hot feelings about Saul to his master, whose voice he'd grown to love. So Samuel's beside himself, so upset, because he chose him. It's his mate. He vouched for him, believed in him. Now he's turned his back on Yahusha. Then early the next morning, Sam went to talk with Saul, and someone told him, King Saul went to Carmel, where he had a monument built for himself, so everyone would remember his victory over Amalek. Then he left for Gilgal. Not only had Yahusha ordered his chosen people not to erect standing stones, but Saul was taking all the credit and esteem for his victory over the Amalekites. Dealt with this a lot too. What happens if you try and take credit and esteem for something that Yahusha's doing? You get slapped down. You don't get any more fresh stuff from Yahusha if he can't trust you. We're supposed to be a mouthpiece. Do you want credit? It's so boring wanting recognition. Been in that swill for a long time and you get nowhere. You get no satisfaction really. It's best to just listen and do, listen and do. Saul's taken all the credit for himself, and Sam finally caught up with Saul, who'd been sacrificing to Yahusha some of the best sheep from Amalek. That should have been put under the ban. And Saul greeted Sam happily. Hi mate, there should be a bloody big blessing from Yahuwah coming your way, for I've done everything he told me to do. Have you really? Sam said. Then why on earth can I hear the bleating of sheep and cattle? Your men got sore throats or something? Oh, those? Busted. Hey, that's not my fault. The army took them from the Amalekites. Saul put his foot further into his mouth. Yeah, they kept the best sheep and cattle so we could sacrifice them to Yahuwah, your Elohim. Your Elohim, not my Elohim. Your Elohim. Kept the best sheep so we could sacrifice them to Yahuwah, your Elohim. But don't worry, Sam. Don't worry, mate. We destroyed everything else. The whole city's been leveled, mate. Just shut up, Sam said. Do you want to know what Yahuwah told me last night, or just keep making excuses? Of course I want to know. Spill. You came from nothing, Saul, but Yahuwah anointed you to be king, and you are in charge of all the tribes of Yisrael. Then Yahuwah sent you on this special mission, telling you to completely wipe out those worthless Amalekites and put everything under the ban. So why didn't you listen to him? Why did you swoop in, keep the animals for yourself and make him furious? You didn't even kill the bloody king. Oi, I did listen to Yahuwah, Saul answered. He sent me on a mission and I went. I captured King Agag and destroyed his nation, putting it all under the ban. It's just some of the animals that we kept. And they were going to be destroyed anyway. So my army brought the best ones to Gilgal to sacrifice to Yahuwah, your Elohim. What's the big difference? Whether they burn here or there? I mean, you could see it's Saul's logic. Well, they're going to burn up over there anyway, so why not bring them over here and we'll sacrifice them and, That's his logic. That's his way. Do you really think Yahuwah gives a toss about your sacrifices and offerings? No. He'd rather you obey him in even the smallest details. Don't you know that rebellion and stubbornness is the same as divination and idolatry? That's right. You might as well have offered the whole city up to a foreign deity because you're so proud and refuse to do what Yahuwah tells you. You can't just make up your own rules and do whatever you want, Saul, thinking you can just sacrifice a few animals like you've got a get out of jail free card up your sleeve and then say, hey, presto, it's all good, mate. I've been obedient. You got no freaking idea. And that's why Yahuwah's decided that you can't be the king anymore. So you can see Yahusha's point of view as well. We can all see Saul's point of view. So what's the big deal? These animals are going to be destroyed anyway. Who cares where it happens? This is the human point of view. We've all had our own point of view before. Oh, that's a bit extreme. Let's just take some of them. We won't kill the king yet. Let's showboat him around to let everyone know how powerful we are as a nation and how good I am as a king. Then I'll kill him when I'm ready. You can see his point of view. That's not what Yahusha asked him to do. So what I want to talk about for a few minutes is the difference between Saul's point of view and Yahusha's point of view. There's under the ban, which is what Yahusha said, versus personal offerings, which Saul thought was quite acceptable. There is a huge difference between spoils of war being banned for Yahusha and destroyed, and those same spoils being taken home and offered for a personal sacrifice. What's the difference? The difference is that the spoils of set-apart war already belong to Yahusha. They're his. The spoils were in possession of the enemy, then transferred to Yahusha, and they didn't at any point belong to the soldiers. So in the burning up of the spoils as banned, Yahusha is merely receiving what is rightfully already his property. But a sacrifice is entirely different because the animal was the property of the person, representing a real cost to them because they either raised it or bought it. So, for Saul to steal what already belongs to Yahusha and then offer it back to him on an altar is a terrible fraud. It's like me stealing your wallet, taking your money out of it, going and buying you a present, and then handing it back to you saying, oh no, wonderful. You know, that's what Saul's doing. He's actually taking animals that belong to Yahusha because they were supposed to be destroyed as part of the war, taking them as his own, and then offering them up to Yahusha as though this is my sacrifice to you. It's not your sacrifice. They belong to me, you know. So it's a terrible fraud. The destruction of the band takes place. This is another point. The destruction of the band takes place on unclean pagan ground. It is officiated over by secular officials, usually Israeli military officers, and is burnt up using a common fire, what the Torah refers to as strange fire. So when it's destroyed, the band, when they're conquering the city, it's all strange fire. It's all foreign, common fire, normal fire. However, an authorized and set-apart sacrifice must be officiated over by Levitical priests. It must also follow a rigid protocol, we've done all this in Leviticus, and take place on set-apart ground, upon the set-apart altar, using set-apart fire. Remember all our studies about the divine fire that came from the ┕𝗪◡? If the fire is not in it from Yahusha, it's not a proper offering. So that's another point as well, that he's not grasping, doesn't care really, it's just ridiculous to him. So that's what Saul's done, doing it his way. So Samuel's saying you can't just do what you want and then just chuck up some offerings and think you're all self-righteous and amazing, you know, like you've got a get out of jail free card. You can't just do it like that. Offerings mean nothing, sacrifices mean nothing if you're not obedient, if you're not doing what you're told. You've got no idea, and that's why you can't be the king anymore. Yes, you're right, Saul admitted. I disobeyed both you and Yahuwah because I was afraid of the army, and I listened to them instead. Please forgive me and come back with me so I can serve Yahuwah. No, I'm not going back that way, mate. You've blown it. You disobeyed Yahuwah, and he said that you can't be the king of Israel anymore. And Saul fell to the ground in desperation, groveling in a last-ditch effort to save his throne. And as Sam turned to go, Saul grabbed the edge of his robe, tearing it. And Sam said, just as you've torn my robe, Yahuwah has torn the kingdom of Israel, the reign, away from you today, and given it to someone who's better than you. Besides, the eternal Elohim of Israel isn't a human being. He doesn't tell lies or change his mind, and he never relents. Difference between the scripture and this footage I've been showing is that Saul is actually on the ground. You'll see this here. It's not he's not standing up on the same level. Didn't rip it from the top like all these shows that we watch say. No, the hem of a garment was a symbol of a person's authority. Stooping down and grabbing another's hem said, I submit to you. So Saul was actually on the ground. Not challenging Samuel like the videos show. No, he was on the ground. You know, groveling almost. Submitting to Sam's authority. Because the hem is on the ground. You know where the hem is? Saul certainly did not intend to tear or otherwise degrade Samuel's symbolic hem of authority. Rather, he intended to demonstrate a recommitment to Yahusha's authority through Sam, however insincere. But it was too late. Yahusha's decision was final. What a terrifying thought.
The Amalekite king must die.
I spared their king as an example to the other tribes.
So they could see what we do to our enemies.
You were to destroy them all. You spared this king to mark your own triumph.
Samuel, I have listened to your commands all the years I have sat on that throne, and not once have I questioned you. But now you sanction murder in the name of Elohim?
In your weakness, you put yourself above. I am the prophet.
And I am the king!
You do not question his will. Just as your ancestors' sword slaughtered my people, my sword will slaughter you.
You think I fear you? I do not fear you.
It's not me you should fear. It is a sign. Elohim will tear the kingdom of Israel from you and choose another in your place.
You lie.
So he's grabbed his garment, ripped it off. Sam said, "That's a sign. Just as you ripped my garment, Yahusha's ripping the kingdom away from you." Saul said, "I know I was wicked, but please honor me in front of the leaders of the army and the people of Yisrael, so they don't suspect anything's wrong. Please come back with me for one final photo op, so I can worship 𝗓𝗓 your Elohim." And even though Saul was more interested in keeping the illusion of his dynasty alive than facing anything or being forgiven, Sam decided to follow him back, and Saul bowed down to Yahuwah in the high place in front of the people. So even though Saul's just interested in saving face amongst his officials and his people and making everyone think that he's still the ants pants and high and mighty and there's nothing wrong, look, Sam's here, we're in agreement, all that's all he's interested in. Sam still agrees to go back with him. It was expected after such a great victory in battle that Yisrael would gather, sacrifice and feast to celebrate, with King Saul and the prophet Sam standing arm in arm as the united leadership of Yisrael. But Sam is now a kindly old man and has really been heartbroken over how King Saul has conducted himself, leading Yisrael over a slippery slope by behaving so rebelliously, making Sam feel like a complete fool for choosing him. So Sam was not there to celebrate, but to finish the mission that Saul refused to do. And what was that mission? Samuel shouted, "Bring me King Agag of the Amalekites." And King Agag entered the crowd in chains with a big smile on his face, saying, "You won't kill me now, old man." But Sam said, "Agag, you have snatched our children from their mother's arms and killed them in cold blood. So now your mother will be without children." And with that, Sam chopped him to pieces at the place of worship in Gilgal. Then Sam went home to Ramah, and Saul returned to his home in Gibeah. And even though Sam grieved Saul for the rest of his life, he never saw him again. And Yahushua was also sorry that he ever anointed Saul the king of Yisrael. Sam was more devastated than Saul over Saul's loss of the royal dynasty. So Sam's pretty upset about what he's gone through with Saul and this ordeal, because he was the ruler of the tribes, remember, Sam? He was the final judge. All 12 tribes looked to him because he'd proven that he could hear his voice. He was the leader as such, the only judge that all 12 tribes looked to. And he had to step aside because Yisrael just wanted to toss him aside and have a real king. So he's gone along with it, relented and gone along with it, and look what's happened. Just like Lucifer created one of the most beautiful beings, just like Lucifer constantly lifts his own importance and desires over the instructions of Yahushua, Saul, chosen by Yahushua, was now permanently rejected because he insisted on doing everything his own way, which is rebellion and idolatry to Yahushua. Did you know that doing things your way, is actually the same as rebellion and idolatry? And we know how Yahushua feels about idolatry. Did you realize that's how serious it is? There's a whole list of things, ever since the beginning of the scriptures that we started, that Yahushua considers an abomination: drinking blood, sodomy, tree worship, idolatry. Well, look what the scripture says here. Having your own way, disobeying him, is the same as idolatry. So by Sam permanently separating himself now Saul was left stranded in the driest spiritual desert imaginable. The living water of Yahushua's word was no longer available to Saul, and the set-apart spirit that at one time rested upon him was now forever lifted. And we're about to see the result of such a downward spiral. That's the end of the text today. So let's continue this theme of the reign, because it's only in shadow form back here, isn't it? We're seeing Yisrael choose a certain reign over another reign, an earthly king over having Yahushua as their king and his representative Samuel. We're seeing choices being made, just like there's choices today between reigns and dynasties. So when we look up the word reign in the Hebrew, we get to reign, to ascend the throne, induct into royalty, to take counsel, consult, to set up a king or a queen, dominion, kingdom, kingly realm, reign, empire. Remember, as we go through this, this is the theme of these overarching books, the Samuel, Kings and Chronicles. We're in the kingdom books. They're known for centuries as the kingdom books. The Hebrew word for kingdom is reign. See where we're going? And this is what reign means. All these words here. An empire, the estate, have power to maintain, rule, assemble, close up, detain, fast, keep, prevail, recover, refrain, to tread down, subjugate, to crumble off, or to vanquish. So that's reign in the Hebrew. Some scriptural understanding. A dynasty in the scripture means sovereignty, lordship, and dominion. Genesis 37 speaks of dreams given by Yahushua of a sovereign to take over another sovereign reign, in the fabulous story of Joseph and the coat of many colours. Remember that? He was dreaming about two different reigns. And it's all about family. All reign speaks of family involvement. Let's bring this close to home, yeah? All reigns speak of family involvement. Many families today want to make a dynasty of their lives and to be a ruling class over others. This being proof of their reign. This could be large families, rich families. It could even be poor families. It could just be you and a couple of your kids. It's a behaviour. We're talking about a behaviour here, a dynastically charged behaviour. Many families today want to make a dynasty of their lives and to be a ruling class over others. This being proof of their reign, whether being said or just noted. Clans today are in constant conflict over dominance of a reign controlling people on many different levels of blatancy or subtlety. It can be very obvious, it can be sticking out there, their behaviour, really blatant, or it can be very sneaky and subtle. These go into extremes within religion, politics and commerce. Working without and living apart from Torah instruction is virtually on the edge of manifesting mental disorders. It practically is mental disorders. If you get to know people closely enough, intimately enough, you realise that living apart from the Torah instructions, outside of that, they're nuts. Mental disorders. Such behaviour always finds the one trying to exalt themselves as being thwarted and embarrassed, forever making excuses why their reign isn't superior. I've been like this. Have you been like this? Always trying to lift yourself up, trying to prop yourself up, make your family, yourself, your life, your business, your everything more better than what it really is. Because if you are, and you're not being genuine, such behaviour always finds the one trying to exalt themselves as being thwarted and embarrassed. You always end up embarrassed, forever making excuses why their reign isn't superior. Life can be very disorienting, trying to navigate oneself out of such behaviours, especially since it has been with us since childhood. We've got most of these behaviours from our parents and their parents and their parents. It's passed on. Sadly, if we're not under one dynastically ruled family, we're under three others, all trying to have us in their social calendar. These dynasties want to control the hearts of acceptable men and women and are not interested in the lower class unless they can find a bloodline association. Many people are researching their past to be associated with a well-known dynasty. Dynasties. That's what Christopher calls them. Dynasty. This may give you an understanding of why it is so hard to live today. Another thing is Yahusha works against dynasties. So you've got to look at this really close to home, guys. You've got to look at just you, your spouse, and your children. How do you behave? How do you view them? Are you holding on to everything, trying to keep everything together and control everything? Or have you surrendered it, your situation, to Yahusha and willing to listen and do, prove that you won't take things personally, prove that you won't judge, you won't get in the way? Are you willing to go there no matter what happens? Because your children, you just raise them and they go. And however long it takes is however long it takes. You can't control the situation. You raise them in the scripture, raise them in the Torah, Yahusha's instructions, and then they have a choice what they're going to do with it. And we have to watch what they've chosen and not take it personally. Let them have their experience. Trust that Yahusha knows what he's doing. Otherwise, you get in there and you're trying to control everything. So, very exciting where the scripture's going. It's all about dynasties lately. And the thing I love about these articles is it's bringing what could be very foreign to us or just very distant, because it's all King Saul and now we're coming into King David and all this sort of stuff that, you know, we could look at it, oh, that's very interesting. What's that got to do with us? This is what it has to do with us. Because it's the same behavior. People of Yisrael rejected Yahusha. They wanted a real king. So he gave them a real king. And now the real king had a choice whether you should listen to Yahusha through Sam or do his own thing. He's now doing his own thing as well. So all the way through there are two choices. There's two families. There's two bloodlines. Yeah? There's your bloodline, your flesh and blood, and how precious your children are, and precious your wife and husband, your parents, and all this natural bloodline and family and kinship and all this rubbish. Because Yahusha's chosen you and pulled you out of all that, and he's doing something very, very different. And he says, those who love father, mother, sister, brother, children more than me don't deserve me, not worthy to have me. So while we might be surrounded by children and family, we need to keep tapping in to Yahusha and honor him in every situation. Speak out when we need to speak out, shut up when we're told to shut up. And when there's a test or a trial, are you going to pass or are you going to fly off the handles? This is where Yahusha wants his bride to go, so that she has self-control, so that there is a change. You saw in our last video, Christopher was saying that he's going to the gutter snipes. He's going to people who are down and out and lost and hopeless, and nobody wants to know them. Nobody want to give them the time of day. They're the people he's energizing and filling with his spirit. So we're going to keep going. In our next episode, we're actually going to meet David, the chosen king. It gets very, very exciting, guys. So love you. Stay strong.